MELCs as a learning standard needs unpacking. Is there a definite strategy in doing it? Hello, I'm Zircon and welcome to my channel. A long intro was done as informative background for MELCs. Please use the timecode in the description below to jump from various parts. On the second International Day of Education, last January 24, 2020, Education Cannot Wait Director Yasmin Sharif interviewed one of today's most prominent and passionate advocate for the global movement to ensure education for all. He is the Right Honorable Gordon Brown, the UN Special Envoy for Global Education and Chair of the ECW High-Level Steering Group. He said, "Children and youth affected by emergencies cannot be out of school or wait for a decent education for years. As a matter of fact, education is their only hope and opportunity. By the same token, every affected country needs human capital to rebuild and recover." On May 11, 2020, our Department of Education Secretary, Leonor Magtolis-Briones, said, "Education must continue. The children cannot wait. We need to find ways for learning to continue. I am also afraid, but that is what life is all about. To face your fears, to face your anxieties, to find ways of dealing with all of these things. And we have to train the children how to handle the changes, even the acceptance of change. This is a whole new world, a whole new normal. This is it. We have to live with it as best as we can, and I have every confidence that we will succeed." To ensure that learning standards are relevant and flexible to address the impact of COVID-19, the Bureau of Curriculum Development, or the BCD, headed by Director Jocelyn Andaya, immediately went to work and developed the most essential learning competencies, or MELCs. How did they come up with the MELCs? As early as January 2019, Secretary Briones vigorously pushed for the review of the K-12 curriculum. The BCD started working on the implementation of essential learning competencies. The phases covered the intended curriculum, implemented curriculum, assessed curriculum, and attained curriculum. The review on some of the phases was finished long before COVID-19 struck. Through mapping, identification, and analysis, the BCD and the research councils clearly identified the need for the retainment of the essential learning competencies and not the desirable learning competencies. When COVID struck, the number of essential learning competencies were further reduced. Thus, the term most essential learning competencies. To ensure the learning outcomes are still achieved even in this pandemic, the MELCs is the answer to sustaining the delivery of quality, accessible, relevant, and liberating basic education anchored on the Sulong Edukalidad framework. From the curriculum guide, essential learning competencies were called out, and from that, MELCs were developed. These are the competencies that are necessary in an emergency situation such as this pandemic. There is no new curriculum. Releasing the MELCs does not replace the use of the K-12 curriculum guide. Rather, This serves as guide for teachers in the instructional need of learners. From 100% or 14,171 learning competencies in the curriculum guide, from kinder to grade 12, it was down to 40% or 5,689 due to limited learning modalities and shortening of the school year. Thus, MELCs can also be called the streamlined or trimmed competencies. This is the bar graph representation on the reduced number of competencies. The most essential learning competencies were determined through the criteria called endurance. It is enduring if it remains and useful to the learners beyond the unit of study. That is, it contributes to a lifelong learning. As a general rule, learning competencies are retained if it satisfies the endurance criterion, which greatly contributes to lifelong learning and is a prerequisite skill to the next grade level. Merged or clustered if they have the same objective or learning intention, thus can be combined into one comprehensive learning competency. Dropped if they are, number 1, too specific and the articulation is similar to that of a learning objective. 2. Deemed appropriate to be introduced in an earlier quarter or grade level or moved to a later quarter or grade level. 3. If it is recurring. And 4. Subsumed in another learning competency. And the last, rephrase, to be more concise. Thus, from the current curriculum guide, the inclusion of MELCs look like this. We still have the content standard, performance standard culled from the original curriculum guide, then the MELCs, then the learning competencies with the K-12 code, which tells us the learning area, in this case science. The number 3 stands for the grade level, so meaning this is for grade 3. The content, which is empty for matter, and it's in the first quarter. The small letter H to J correspond to the week, so it's for week 8 to 10. And it's the fourth learning competency for the specified quarter. Sometimes, there is an additional column for the learning resources. This is the reference material where a teacher can access in the LRMDS portal. You may notice that there is no K-12 curriculum guide code indicated. The missing code means the MELC is either merged or replaced. Sometimes, you might wonder that the MELCs code are not in sequence. From A to B1, it jumped to C to D3. What happened to C to D2? The learning competency corresponding to this code is dropped. In mathematics, we have learning competencies that were merged, dropped, and retained, and the justification for such actions. Same with Araling Panlipunan and with all other learning areas in different grade level. If MELCs is standard-based curriculum, just like the learning competencies of the curriculum guide, knowing that all learning standards are constructed the same way, then they all identified what the student must know and be able to do within a certain context. Moreover, note that the MELCs cater to HATS or higher order thinking skills, just like the learning competencies of the curriculum guide. There is really a simple process that we all can use regardless of what content we teach. Regardless of what grade level we teach, we just break down these standards and make sure that we're doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And it's called unpacking the standards. We unpack because we want to provide a systematic learning experiences for the learners. That is, provide logical sequence of learning in attaining the competency that will eventually lead to the attainment of content and performance standard. There is a guideline exactly on how to do that and tell if we are meeting these standards. It's not an overly complicated process, but just a 4 simple steps. Step number 1. Identify the concepts, knowledge, and skills. Identify the nouns and verbs in the learning competency. The nouns will guide us on the content standards, the things we are supposed to teach. And the verbs will guide us on the performance standard, the skills we need to develop among learners. In our example, the verb usually found at the beginning of the sentences are in red text, while the nouns are blue. Step number 2. Identify the level in the revised Bloom's taxonomy to define expectations which will serve as your target objective. Bloom's taxonomy was developed by Benjamin Bloom, 1956, and was revised by Lauren Anderson in 2000. Taxonomy is a classification process and there is a sequence. The idea is, learning builds on itself as the learner moves from one segment to the next. The bottom being the lowest, going to the top being the highest cognitive process. It focuses on the verb to classify the level of thinking based on hierarchy. For our first competency, the verb is nasasabi, and it is under apply of revised Bloom's taxonomy. The second competency and the third competency, distinguish and classify respectively, belong to the level of analyze in the revised Bloom's taxonomy. Step number 3. Create student-friendly learning objectives. Identify the prerequisite skills, starting from the bottom level of revised Bloom's taxonomy, moving step to step higher until reaching the target skills. When we are looking at the student-friendly learning objectives, there's no way on the first day that we're teaching this lesson and will meet the standards. Most of the time, it's impossible. Therefore, we are going to build their skills. We are going to build their level to the standards. What's not okay is that you say, well, they don't have the skills to achieve this standard, so you're going to stop at something short of the standard because then you're not meeting the standard. What is important is we are moving closer and closer to the actual standard by building the foundation. Last and final step, identify the evidence of learning. Identify the evidence of learning through formative assessment task. Through this, the learners will be able to show mastery of the competencies, what they understand, and what they are able to do. Ensure alignment between competencies and formative assessment task. When done unpacking, you can easily make a daily lesson plan, or a self-learning module, or maybe a learning activity sheets that you can use as you have monitored learners who lag behind. To wrap up, Unpacking the standard allows a teacher to see what a child will know and be able to do. Again, step 1. Identify the verbs for the skills and the nouns for the content in the given standard. Step 2. Identify the content complexity using revised Bloom's taxonomy. Step 3. Create student-friendly learning competencies. Create objectives using the prerequisite skills starting from the very bottom of the revised Bloom's taxonomy and building up step by step until you reach the target skills. And step number 4, identify the evidence of learning by creating learning task and the teacher task. Truly, unpacking standard is simply as ABCD. Revised Bloom's taxonomy is a guide where to start and where to stop in building and targeting the standard. Attaining the standard means targeting the knowledge and skills required. Stopping below and above it is a no-no. However, the Department of Education talks about the KUD framework. The K of KUD stands for knowing, U stands for understanding, and D stands for doing. This means that the knowledge must be understood and applied at the level set by the standard. How are you going to do this? We need to use another research-based 21st century tool called DOC or DOK. Honestly, it's not a secret. This repacking technique uses Webb's depth of knowledge. Webb's depth of knowledge is developed by Norman Webb in 1997. DOK is a model to analyze how deep a student must think to answer questions and complete activities. If the revised Bloom's idea is the building of learning from one segment to the next, bottom up, Webb's DOK is presented through a 4-level. The level includes recall, skills, strategic thinking, and lastly, extended thinking. The levels are not hierarchy. It focuses on the description of thinking process using a verb. That is, the first 3 is a progression, except DOK4. DOK4 is not harder. It's not some higher level of Bloom's taxonomy. DOK4 is a sideways shift or a lateral shift, a transfer of knowledge. Webb's DOK indicate the content complexity of a task. This is not the same as difficulty. A level 1 can sometimes be difficult than a level 4. DOK is not about difficulty. DOK is about the intended outcome. That means the intended student learning outcome is the focus of DOK. DOK is a reference to the complexity of mental processing or cognitive complexity that must occur to answer a question, perform a task, or at level 4, generate a product. 3 basic components of DOK are the knowledge that the students will acquire, use, and then use to extend their thinking. DOK level 1 is recall and reproduction. Level 1 is acquired knowledge. At this level, students remember facts or define a procedure. We can think of this level as, what is the knowledge? There is no cognitive challenge in simple recall, facts, and information. DOK level 2 is skills and concepts. It goes beyond recall. At level 2, Students are generally comparing or contrasting. Level 2 DOK goes from the what to the why. Level 3 is analysis. This level involves strategic thinking. At this level, complexity increases. It involves planning, justifying, and complex reasoning. Student explains how concepts and procedures can be used. At this point, we can think, why can the knowledge be used? Level 4 requires extended thinking. Students must go beyond the standard learning and ask how else can the learning be applied in real-world contexts. Level 4 can be thought of as how else can the knowledge be used. This is an example of how a DOK verb in context can be translated into different DOK level. Following the steps we had before, we are now going to repack a learning standard applying both the revised Bloom's taxonomy and Webb's depth of knowledge. Number 1. Identify the concepts, knowledge, and skills. Number 2. Identify the content complexity using the revised Bloom's taxonomy and Webb's depth of knowledge. Number 3. Create student-friendly learning competencies. And 4. Identify the evidence of learning. Again, Unpacking MELCs will greatly help our learners in their learning activities. It's easy to do it, either bottom-up using the revised Bloom's taxonomy or bottom-down and lateral using Webb's depth of knowledge, but never bottomless. And remember, kung ano lang ang target na MELCs, hanggang doon lang. Huwag nang sobrahan at pahirapan ang bata. Pwedeng i-extend, pero dapat aligned pa rin. Further, we see to it that what is learned is connected to the real world. Contextualize the MELCs in order to accommodate, to guarantee the Filipino learners the relevant and quality basic education despite the current health crisis. Let's advocate equitable education for all. It's your time to shine. For your output presentation, try to unpack a sample of most essential learning competency or MELCs. Thank you for watching.